Welcome along to Tweet Street Scotland Occupied. I'm Cinnamon Bridges, aka Peter. With me this evening, my co-host, we've got Lucy for Parents Across Scotland. Hi Lucy, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, Peter. How you doing?
I'm not so bad, not so bad. Been busy today?
Yeah, work. Just
Aye,
work.
the usual.
It's Friday though, so it's good.
Yeah, it's Friday and we've got, well, I think we've got a cracking guest coming on. We've got Tanya from the Safe Schools Alliance. So I'm just going to open it straight up to you, Tanya. I've read a lot of the stuff that you've got on Twitter. So can you tell us a wee bit about Safe Schools Alliance, how it formed and why you formed?
Oh, hi Peter, thanks for having me on here this evening. Yes, Safe Schools Alliance, we officially launched May 2019. Before then, we were just a group of parents, grandparents, governors, teachers, other health professionals, sort of psychologists, nurses, who were sort of informally working together. But May 2019, we properly launched, logo, grassroots group. We wrote to the NSPCC about safeguarding concerns there with regards to Munro Bergdorf, who they had as one of their ambassadors, who we'd seen making extremely racist and homophobic remarks online, and was encouraging children to contact him directly. So showing a poor understanding of safeguarding, and we didn't think this was a suitable ambassador for NSPCC. So it was at that point we launched as an official group. Before then, we'd just sort of come together. We were all people who were concerned about safeguarding. We were concerned about what was going on in our own schools that meant that children weren't being kept safe, that our established safeguarding frameworks, which have come about through years, every time something goes wrong, a child dies or a child is seriously harmed, there's a serious case review done into that. And there's always learning. The learning is usually about lack of communication between agencies, lack of listening to people. So every time there's one of these cases, there's learning from it. Our safeguarding frameworks improve, and this should keep children safe in the future. But it became apparent that these were being undermined. Not everyone was adhering to them. So just as sort of like parents, and we are mainly women, we started talking to each other, and eventually we were a group through sort of getting together at various events that had been hosted by Women's Place UK or Fair Play for Women, or we'd met online, or we were friends of friends. We became a group across 30 counties in the country. So we got going as an official group because it was apparent that it wasn't just the odd parent having problems in their own school who needed a bit of support from other parents in how to challenge things. It became very clear that this was a national problem and that people could really benefit from what was our group expertise at that point. And as you can see from our website, we've now got lots of template letters, we've got fact sheets, we've got a whole new document on how parents can engage with schools about RSE and PSHE. It gives you all the likely things schools may say to you when you say, well, hang on a minute, is this right? Should you be doing this? We've pulled together all the likely responses schools make to that and told you how, and told parents how they can respond to that. So yeah, basically we're grassroots, parents, teachers, other professionals, and we want to help other parents do what we have done and challenge schools and make sure that they are doing their jobs and keeping children safe. Sorry, that was a very long introduction.
No, thank you for that, because I think a lot of people need to hear how things originated and where we're at and why we're at these places. So for me, it's kids first. So the fact that you're doing that and you're trying to provide safeguarding and shore up the safeguarding where the flags are alerted. So it's a great thing. I've just displayed the website on screen. I've been on your website before, but for anybody who hasn't, it is really easy to navigate. There's some useful information. And if you're looking for a place to start, this is the ideal place, especially if you've got kids at school. There are other places there available, but this one will get you started. Lucy, over to you, and I'll just be in the background, ladies. Well, you chat, and I'll try and display whatever it is you're chatting about, okay?
Okay, thanks, Peter.
brilliant, Peter. Tanya, I was just wondering, so obviously you started up to address the sort of issues that you were seeing in regards to safeguarding. Would you mind just explaining a wee bit more specifically what it is, and I suppose really looking at the sort of adoption of the gender ideology in schools, and how you think that that has actually impacted safeguarding? Because I don't know, you are aware, but we're having quite a lot of issues here in Scotland since the guidance for transgender pupils was put out by the Scottish Government, and what we're hearing up here is that a lot of the time schools just feel as though they're kind of left on their own to try and manage this situation. And I just wondered what you had seen and what sort of things you have been working on in regards to that.
Oh yes, absolutely. There's so much misinformation floating around out there. The Department for Education did put out some guidance in September 2020, but it's not statutory. It's not strong enough. It's not being enforced. I mean, I'm a mum. My children are sort of teens and adults now. I've worked in early years. I'm an ex-chair of governors. So I've sort of been involved in safeguarding my whole adult life. And anytime you get some safeguarding in place, sort of frameworks, barriers to keep children safe, people with ulterior motives will always try and attack that and try and unpick it and try and say there's a reason for not needing things like interviewing or not being left on your own with children or not having a DBS. People will always try and find ways around it who want to access children. And over the last few years, what we've seen being used to unpick safeguarding is all these trans inclusion toolkits in schools, where they're saying that they're there to help lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans identified children. But what they're doing is they're taking these children, and the very children they're supposed to be helping, they're removing them from the safeguarding frameworks. We've seen so many toolkits which have said that if a child makes any sort of disclosure, you should just keep that secret. That absolutely flies in the face of any sort of safeguarding. What always comes out of these serious case reviews is a lack of communication. If a child makes any sort of disclosure to you in a school setting, you always pass that on to the designated safeguarding lead, who will have all the other information about the child. Their first port of call normally would be to speak to the parents, see what's going on in that child's life. If you have reason to think that you shouldn't speak to the parents about the child because that would endanger the child further, then there are procedures to follow. If you think that child is at risk from their own parents, you don't just not do anything with that information. You pass that up the line. You're involving other agencies. So up until the point that you think the parents are a danger to the child, which you then need to involve other people in the conversation, they're always the first people you need to talk to, because it's always in a child's best interest if all the adults involved in their care are working together for the best interests of that child. So that was the first flag, that they wanted some already vulnerable children who needed support completely removed from frameworks, and wanted individual teachers to be able to keep secrets with children from parents. You don't even have to be trained in safeguarding to know that that is a massive breach. That's something basic. Everybody knows. You don't tell children to keep secrets, because we all know what can happen there. Then there was things like saying that if a boy says he identifies as a girl, he can instantly use the girls' toilets and the girls' changing room. Absolutely no consideration for the rights or the feelings of those girls. Obviously, you want that child who is identifying as an opposite sex to feel comfortable when he's going to the toilet or he's changing. But you have to balance that with the rights of the other children. And before they were getting all this misinformation from toolkits, this is something schools do all the time. It's their day job. They have like several hundred children in their care, and they're used to the fact that everyone's rights have to be balanced, and that you'll have different parents with different opinions. And they do sometimes have to deal with some really tricky situations. But this toolkit is instantly saying that the girls in that school have no rights whatsoever.
Yeah.
Then we were getting into issues with compelled speech, saying that children and teachers must use opposite sex pronouns. That's problematic for two reasons. That's compelling the speech of others, to forcing them to say something they know to be a lie. It's also a problem for that child, because that's social transition, that's affirmation. The psychologists in our group say that deciding to socially transition a child is a form of treatment, and that's not something that teachers can undertake. They're not qualified. They're not qualified to do so. That's something that needs to be taken. That's a big step to take, really, that needs to be taken in conjunction with psychologists and psychiatrists, because the minute you're sort of socially transition, that's the first step on the path to puberty blockers. And we know from the research that once children are on puberty blockers, very few desist, and most will then go on to cross-sex hormones. Whereas the studies show that children who aren't put on puberty blockers, most, I think the figures are around 80% will desist around puberty. Once they go through puberty, with help and support, they will become reconciliated with their sex body, and most of these children will grow up to be gay or lesbian adults, and they'll be perfectly happy, have perfectly fulfilling lives. But if we're socially transitioning quite young children, they're not sort of really being given the chance to explore and discover that maybe they are gay, maybe they are lesbian, and we need to be reassuring those children that that's perfectly okay, and they need to be having gay and lesbian role models and told that it is perfectly okay. Whereas some of the stuff we've seen, it seems to be suggesting that a same-sex attraction is a sign of being transgender. Now, we'd consider that gay conversion therapy, and a lot of adults who email us for help and support, they're gay or lesbian themselves, or they're gay and lesbian teachers, and they're horrified about what's being done to children in their schools. So
it seems like is it's went from one direction and just completely pivoted. So there was a focus for a good few years there on the sort of anti-bullying message, as you'll know, in schools, and it seems like instead of building on the good momentum that was there with regards to anti-bullying, because everybody was behind it, what they've done is they've kind of shoehorned and focused on this one particular group of young people, and what it feels like is then all the other young people round about them, or all the other children, I'm going to say, round about them, seem to be like missed, is what I'm picking up. They're certainly getting missed in the sense of there's a big focus on making sure that the children who are perhaps identifying as transgender, that they are safe and secure, as absolutely they should be, because they should be within the normal safeguarding framework. They shouldn't be outside of it. But when they're looking at this one particular group, it feels to me that there's a wee bit missing round about the other children.
Oh, absolutely. This is a two-sided problem. It's not in the best interests of those individual trans identified children. It's also causing problems for the surrounding children. I mean, if you look at what some of the whistleblowers at the Tavistock have said, which I think you have Sandyford here in Scotland, don't you?
Right,
yeah, a lot of the whistleblowers from the Tavistock have said that it wasn't being explored whether these children had suffered trauma, whether they had perhaps suffered homophobic bullying at school, whether they had homophobic families, if they had internalized homophobia. None of this stuff was just was being explored as to why these children felt like this. It was just tunnel vision. You must affirm or else. And yes, children are bullied in schools for all different sorts of reasons, and that all needs to be explored. I mean, one of the biggest reasons children are bullied in school are children with SEN are very vulnerable. Poverty is another reason children are bullied a lot in school, and all these issues need to be treated with equal importance, and no child should go through school feeling bullied. And with some of these things, like the pack from the CPS, it almost got to the point that children are being bullied by the materials in these packs, bullied that they can't express their views, and girls told that they have to be perfectly okay with adult males in their toilets. It's bizarre and worrying that this is what has come into school under the guise of anti-bullying, which is doing the exact opposite of what it should do. And public money being spent on this. It's really concerning.
It really is, and it's just that it's actually in schools, and as you rightly said there, girls in particular are at risk from this ideology. It's not just their safety we're talking about, just about them. At that age, they're starting to learn about themselves, they're starting to learn about their boundaries, and then to suddenly be told actually your boundaries don't matter anymore, and that anybody can access the space that you're in, and anybody can be a girl, therefore that opens up the dating pool for lesbian girls, and it adds to this extremely difficult time already for them when they're just beginning to explore. And as well, I think I don't know if you would agree, but we seem to be focusing a very adult agenda into children, and we're not looking at the normal natural development, which it's settled, it's researched, it's settled, we know what childhood development is, and we seem to be kind of taking that away a wee bit by saying to them, you can explore, but what you say you're exploring is actually what you are, and that feels really dangerous to me.
Yes, I mean, we've all been teenagers. We all know it's unpleasant being a teenager at times. You're finding out about yourself, you're finding out about your place in the world, you're trying to find your tribe, and these are all sort of quite normal, quite universal experiences which adults should be supporting children with, not sort of. And part of supporting children is to ensure that they don't do anything irreversible when they are still growing up. And before, I mean, obviously at 18, you're an adult, you can make your own decisions, but there's a lot of evidence that your brain hasn't fully matured until, say, the age of 25. So certainly when you're talking about 13 to 15-year-old age group, it's a very difficult time. You're going through puberty. Everyone's a bit self-conscious. I mean, we get emails from parents of boys as well, where a girl has identified as a boy and then been placed in the boys' changing room. Obviously, that's very dangerous for that girl, and you cannot believe that the school have gone against safeguarding like that. But we're also getting emails that these teenage boys are mortified that they've had a girl placed in the changing room with them. They're teenage boys, they're also entitled to privacy and dignity. I mean, like you say, it's very, very difficult being a teenage girl. It's just difficult being a teenager in general. And some adults seem to be going down this very adult ideology route, which isn't supporting the children they should be supporting at all. And the repercussions of that will be very great, I think.
Talking about repercussions, and sorry to kind of interject there, I just wanted to just touch back on the changes that teenagers go through, and when they become an adult, they can make their own decisions. But I would like to share, and this image is very graphic, ladies. You may have seen it on Twitter. It's an image of a double mastectomy of a young teenager. So I'm going to share that, but I want to give a warning first before I do for any of our viewers that we're watching it. Okay, it is a very graphic image. This made me cry. I can't pretend that this image made me cry. A young female who has been captured, indoctrinated, and she wants to change when she's 20 or 30 and gone through a lot of thought process, but at a young age. I watched a podcast earlier on today for a group of ladies in Scotland called The Cauldron, who were speaking to a detransitioner, Sinead Watson. And the stories that we've had to read and investigate or look into, for me, they're sickening. It's worrying. There's this epidemic of indoctrination in who were preteens. Now that they think that everything that they've been told is right, and before they settle into their bodies properly, they're mutilating it. I mean,
it's a form of self-harm. I mean, any other self-harm that we've seen over the years, and you see it a lot with social contagions. I mean, my previous work, I worked in secure care, looking after like most vulnerable children in Scotland, and we've seen social contagions go through there, through self-harm, through eating disorders, and this just is another one. It's exactly what it is, but what we're hearing is what you said earlier, Tanya, was you're getting people who are enabling social transition because they're being told that they need to affirm. And then you've got teachers who are left to try and make these decisions because they're not being helped, or they're not being given the correct guidance. And the government have just put out things and then kind of said it's up to everybody to interpret this the way that you want to. But these are children's lives that we're playing with here. And that, for me, is just something that there's a massive gap. There's a disconnect between government and actually what's happening down at schools and local authority levels. I mean, just quickly, there was the trans guidance that we've got in Scotland. It was basically drafted by activists. There was no proper consultation. It wasn't considered. Parents weren't involved in it. And what you said earlier about this sort of when we look at case reviews for significant incidents that happen to children, we look at them and we find communication lacking, but what we also find is sharing of information is extremely lacking as well. And that includes sharing information with parents. And this guidance that we've got going out to schools in Scotland and put on the best practice, I think it's on the Education Hub as well as just being the best practice. I mean, it actually advises not to tell parents. The advice within it, I mean, there's a quote here: a transgender young person may have not told their family about their gender identity. Therefore, it is best not to share information with parents without considering or respecting the young person's views. Now, that's understandable, maybe speaking to a child about, is there a risk at home? Is there maybe something happening that we need to invoke child protection protocols? But we also get told on the side of this that being transgender or identifying as transgender is not a wellbeing concern in itself. So it's as if it's two completely separate things, but they're shoehorned into the one area. And if you're not sharing information with parents, you're just placing that child at risk of the image that Peter's just shared with us, because you've got your teachers who are trying to just do their best. I mean, I would absolutely hate to be a teacher at this point in time. I just think it would be so difficult. But yeah,
the thing that I was finding, or the thing that I was hearing, and we've done a few podcasts with people from Canada of late, Tanya, who are really captured with the ideology, and there's their government are way, in my opinion, are way over the top with this. It's as if Canada has fallen, and we are going to end up with the legislation that they're intending to pass this year. We're going to end up in a similar position with teens like that who in 5-10 years time may regret everything. Well,
remember, Peter, that the Forum in Scotland had started a campaign just identifying and highlighting the fact that there's been no procedures carried out in Scotland with regards to gender reassignment, but children under the age of 18, I think, correct me, we'll be able to find the information, but I think it's about 56 young girls have been referred down to England for double mastectomies from Scotland. So as much as it isn't physically happening up here, it still is happening.
Still happening to people. The number that I had here, coincidentally, Lucy, at the last count was 51, and that was about
Right.
two or 3 weeks ago. If there's been more revealed for then, that might make up the numbers, but the last number that I had heard confirmed was 51, just in case anybody's banking on it being a definite number.
Yeah, no, I think you're probably right. Yeah.
In the region of the 50s at the last count that I certainly heard anyway. Tanya, I was going to say, on the website, there's information about porn and trans story hour. There was I may have not titled it properly, and hopefully you can title it better than me. However, there was an incident in Scotland where there was a trans person, a drag queen taken into school without parents' permission. Are you finding that there's instances like that being reported where you are?
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, I'm quite near Cambridge. We had there were concerns raised recently about Fat Butcher performing at the Junction in Cambridge. Now, Fat Butcher is a drag queen, and a lot of people enjoy drag as a form of entertainment. A lot of people think drag as a form of entertainment is misogynistic. So there are different views on drags, but the issue here is that this was something that was aimed at quite young children, and when you looked him up online, you were instantly coming up with images that you just did not want small children to see. Well, frankly, some of these images you wouldn't want an under 18 to see. And the Junction seemed to have no idea of the fact that they had completely failed safeguarding by vetting the online persona of a performer before saying he was suitable for children. And a lot of people seem to not be able to take on board the fact that even if the performance was age appropriate, and the jury is out on that because there were different opinions on that, if somebody's online persona and what is very easily available is not suitable for children, you should not be advertising this to children, because even quite young children, they're online these days.
Yeah.
They will instantly look up someone online. This is why people in professions who work with children, like teachers, have to be careful about what you put online. It's why people like social workers are advised not to be online in their own name, because people Google you these days. I mean, I've worked in early years. I certainly wouldn't have been allowed to have any of the images that we've seen Fat Butcher in publicly available online. Look, they're coming up now. So there just seems to be, again, it's adults pushing a specific agenda who have no idea of what is and isn't suitable for children. And the minute you say, well, actually, this is a safeguarding concern, we don't want children looking at stuff like this online, it's age inappropriate. I mean, the NSPCC actually says that children viewing porn online is non-contact child sexual abuse. So you have got to be really careful with what children are viewing. I mean, there's an epidemic with children viewing porn these days. We've had Billie Eilish come out recently and say she was watching it from the age of 11, and she's grown up now. She's a young woman of what, she's 20 now, Billie Eilish.
I think she is,
yeah, she's grown up with that and has now sort of realised the sort of damage it did, because as adults we've let down a whole generation of children. We haven't been careful about what they've seen online. Boys have been exposed to porn online from really early ages, some sort of 10 or possibly even younger. That's non-contact sexual abuse that a large proportion of our young boys have been subjected to. And then because they've seen all this while they're developing, they're going into school and they're sexually harassing their female classmates. And then we've seen from things like Everyone's Invited and the recent Ofsted report we've had down here in England, and NEU and UK Feminista did research 5 years ago and produced a booklet called It's Just Everywhere. The scale of sexual abuse and harassment that girls are subjected to in schools these days is just off the scale, and this needs to be tackled. We need to be getting back on top of safeguarding, and we need to be safeguarding properly, and we need to be saying no to those people who are saying that safeguarding is prudish or it's homophobic or it's something just done by the religious or pearl clutchers. It's not. Any functioning society prioritizes their children and keeps them safe. And if you're not doing safeguarding, is everyone's responsibility, and if as a society we're not doing that, we've failed. And at the moment we are children.
Yeah.
Tanya, do you think the way to tackle this is to put out a survey to children around the age of 14 upwards, specifically asking them about their participation in anal sex as well as other sex acts without the consideration of the trauma potentially experienced by young people? I wonder if you think that's a good idea, because it's something that's happening up here just now.
I'm just sharing that on the screen now, ladies. I haven't shared it earlier, a wee bit too early, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is data we need. Like there was an article in the BMJ which is the British Medical Journal, a few years ago, about how doctors were seeing an increase in really young female children coming to see them with like anal prolapse or seepage because of repeated anal sex, and including sort of really quite young girls, 13, 14. So it's something we do need to know. This does need to be tackled. We need to know how common this is. But like you say, we need to be asking this in a way that is not causing further trauma to children. Once this survey came out, we were contacted by parents who had been sexually abused themselves as children, and they were really distressed by this survey, imagining how children in the situation they had been in would feel answering this question. I mean, how does a child who has been raped or is currently being raped, possibly in their own home by their own family members, feel? They've never told anyone about this, and now they're sat in a classroom surrounded by their peers being asked these questions with no information that they don't have to be doing this, that this is a criminal offence if this is being done to them, no help and support. It's unbelievable that a group of adults could get together and produce that survey and not consider the trauma that could do to some children. And when they've been challenged on this, they've said, oh, the children don't have to answer the questions if they don't want to. I mean, again, sort of abused children are quite compliant children. They're scared of adults. They do what they're told. The fact that some poor child in that situation would actually be able to withdraw themselves from that survey, it's just really unthinking. And I think that wasn't the only concern raised about that survey. I think there were a lot of concerns raised about how the data was being stored. I mean, it's just been so badly thought out, that survey. And again, when people have raised concerns, they're trying to say that people don't want to acknowledge the fact that children under the age of consent may have had sex, or they're saying that people don't want children to have sex education. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Obviously, we want children educated about their rights, what the law is in this country, how they can get pregnant, how they can protect themselves from pregnancy and STIs. But we also want children to know that they have rights, and that this isn't a normal thing if that's happening to them. And there's a reason that the law has set things at a certain age, and to have school just sort of put pressure on you by when you're 14, like, are you having anal sex, how often, in sort of the same way you might ask sort of like, how many days a week do you have breakfast, what do you eat for breakfast? it's staggering that someone can be so unthinking, and not just a person, a group of people have been this unthinking.
I mean,
It's unbelievable.
The thing that I noticed about this survey at the time, can I ask Tanya, where did you get wind of this survey?
I think a parent emailed us in, a parent who had been abused as a child, I think, emailed us in because they'd seen it and they were so upset about the thought of the effect this would have on abused children. And we then put out a Twitter thread on it. And after that, we were contacted by journalists.
Yeah, because on Tweet Street, myself and one of the other co-hosts that we've got, Eileen, we covered this. We actually covered this and put it out because we were so alarmed by it. The thing that alarmed me more than anything was that on the letter here, I mean, it says from primary 5, P5, so that's 10 years old, 9, 10 years old. From 10 years old, that they're going to start asking kids these questions without their parents' knowledge in some cases, because everyday life, I'm going to stop this here at the minute, everyday life gets a hold of some parents, and it used to be the case you would get a letter in the bag and you wouldn't find that letter in the bag until the end of the week, and things could you could miss things. But it now seems to be a parent's responsibility at every juncture to make sure that what they're being told is accurate, because it seems to be what parents are being told and what the actuality of the situation is night and day between it. And the fact that we're looking at the bright light and they're looking at the dark side, it means that when we start to look into it, we don't know what we're looking for. So having things like Safe Schools Alliance and people that are prepared, there's been a lot of professionals coming out now and trying to speak up where there were silenced before. Tanya Marshall's one, you've got Doc Stock, another. I mean, there's the list of people are endless. We had Kerry Black on, who's Femme Love on Twitter, who's been prosecuted by the police for sharing something about paedophilia, and it was her experiences of it and the investigation that she's done, and it was a malicious attack by somebody from Scotland, allegedly, who's already tried to make a name for himself with Marion Miller. It must be because he was shit at acting. Sorry for swearing. I knew that. It must be because he was terrible at acting. But I find that women are being attacked so that kids are easier prey.
Yeah.
Are you finding that that's kind of a similar where you are? Are you finding that that's the common theme that you're hearing?
Oh, well, absolutely. I mean, you learn about this on safeguarding training, that the first stage of grooming children is to groom the adults. It's the Finkelhor model you learn about on safeguarding training, the stages somebody has to go through to abuse a child. First of all, they have to overcome their own internal inhibitors, because abusing children is wrong. Society tells you that abusing children is wrong. Everybody in society agrees that abusing children is wrong. So you have to first have the desire to abuse a child, and then overcome your internal inhibitors telling you not to abuse a child. After that, you need to overcome external barriers, and the external barriers are the adults surrounding those children, those adults who will keep that child safe, like the parents, quite often the mothers, because still, even though it shouldn't be in this day and age, mothers are largely the main carers, and the teachers, all those surrounding protective adults. You need to groom or remove them. So yes, absolutely. You see, some people have been groomed into thinking this undermining of safeguarding is all wonderful and it's all great gender neutral toilets, and which, let's face it, are mixed sex toilets. Adults you can't groom because they're not falling for this, that mixed sex toilets and mixed sex changing rooms and blurring the boundaries between adulthood and childhood are a good thing. Anybody who is not falling for stuff like that, then you need to remove them to get the children. So like you say, we see witch hunts against women like Marion Miller, Kerry, Doc Stock, Alison Bailey. I've really gone for. I mean, Alison Bailey, a black lesbian barrister who's been attacked by Stonewall, the very charity who should be supporting her. It's homophobic, it's misogynistic, it's racist. She's took possibly some of the most abuse of anybody, Alison Bailey. And again, she was one who stood up and talked about her own childhood sexual abuse and what she was seeing unfold. So yes, absolutely, I totally agree that there is this concerted effort to groom or remove protective adults, mainly women, to access children. And this is what's happening at the moment.
And they do it in a way where they accuse women, as you mentioned, Alison Bailey there, of weaponising their trauma. And J.K. Rowling is another extreme example that we're accused of weaponising trauma, weaponising victimhood, and that's all to shut down other people. So J.K. Rowling isn't going to be cancelled. Alison Bailey's absolute powerhouse. She's not going anywhere.
Joanna
but
Cherry,
what it is
don't forget Joanna Cherry in that
Oh, yeah.
mix as well.
Joanna Cherry as well, absolutely. But it's what they're doing is they're sending a message to all other people, and that is what grooming is. It's, as you say, it's about breaking down those protective adults round about. If you've got women, and I'm just saying women, I know that there's men like Peter here as well that are absolutely in this as well, but if you've got women too frightened to speak about their own experiences of what happened to them as children for fear of attacks and persecution and all that, then their message isn't getting out there, and that puts a barrier to children learning about safeguarding and people getting more information about it as well.
Can I just interject there and say, if it wasn't for women, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be aware of this. So me being here is thanks to a lot of strong women that have guided me to where we're at. So I can't take any credit for anything. It's a case of I'm as alarmed as anybody else, and thanks to those strong women for making me aware of this. I'll try and make as many other men aware of this, because it is a danger that we should all be banding together with and saying,
definitely
not with my child.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not with anybody's child. This is a threat to everyone in society. I mean, I saw James Essie's tweet recently saying that people had told him he shouldn't be involved because he's a straight man with no children. Well, no, of course he should be involved. Safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. And beyond that, there's so many different strands to what's going on. It's an attack on women's rights. It's absolutely attack on lesbian and gay and bisexual rights. And also it's an attack on freedom of speech and reality. And that affects every single person in society. So yes, it's not that some people should be involved and some people shouldn't. Everybody should be speaking out from what is their particular area of expertise and how it affects them. And everybody should be speaking out on behalf of the vulnerable. If you have any, I mean, obviously I don't want to criticize people who aren't speaking out on an anonymous, because obviously there's reasons people stay anonymous. Some people can't speak out. People have to pay the bills. Some people just aren't in a position to take an abuse. So, but anybody who is in a position to speak out should be speaking out at this stage. And all those people who are anonymous, they're still doing their bits. I mean, I know there's loads of women out there who do their little bit every day anonymously, and we'll never know those women's names, and yet they've chipped away day in, day out for years. And it's those sort of anonymous women who do keep children safe. And
exactly.
It's I mean, for me, it is everything that I've been introduced to. And when I say introduced to, everything I've been made aware of that's a safeguard, and it's been a woman that's put me in touch with it. That I see it as you say, it's an attack on women, because if we get the women out the road, then it's easy access to the kids. And without trying to be stereotypical, because that's the last thing we want to be doing, but dads are kind of at the tail end of that. It's like, oh, did you see? Oh no, I didn't know that, and we get brought in at the last minute. It's time that we were able to speak up. I know that people are afraid to speak up because of reprisals, because their businesses get attacked, because they get attacked, piled on Twitter and what have you. I mean, as you say, there are people that have been doing this for years, that are anonymous, but without them, a lot of us wouldn't be at this stage. So we have to thank people that, even though they're anonymous, that they've done a great deal for making us aware of where we are.
No, definitely. I mean, it's came, I totally agree, Peter, and I think that we forget very easily history, and what history should be teaching us. I mean, history is littered, absolutely littered with people infiltrating organisations, infiltrating areas that allow them to get access to the most vulnerable, and we just don't seem to be. I think sometimes I worry that we're losing our professional minds. We really are, and we're losing our professional curiosity. And I'm using we. I'm trying my best, but I mean, just in general, like, people are losing their curiosity, their critical thinking. I mean, any other time, before this madness all started, if a child came, as you said right at the beginning, Tanya, if a child came and said to a teacher, I've got a secret and I want to tell you it, don't tell anybody, you would be like, absolutely not, I'm really sorry, but I can't keep this a secret. I have to pass this information on if I think you're at risk. That's gone. It just seems to be that, as you said, frameworks are just broken down, and I really worry about how we're going to build it back up. And I wonder if you have advice or just any sort of thing you could say, if there's parents out there that are thinking, how do I approach my child's school? What kind of things could I say to them to try and raise this issue more? Do you have any advice for them?
I would say get on our website. We've got a guide to engaging with schools. We've got fact sheets on most of this stuff. Most schools do want to engage, and we've had an awful lot of people email in with success stories with schools that a lot of the time, once schools are challenged by parents, they then do start critically thinking, or there may have been teachers there that weren't entirely sure. And then when a parent emails in and says, well, actually, hang on, have you looked at this? Here's some information. Have you heard of safe schools? Have you heard of transgender trend? Here's a newspaper article. That's often the catalyst for teachers and school leaders to start engaging in some critical thinking. So there is a lot of schools out there who, once parents start that conversation, it's gone really well. If that doesn't go really well, we have a guide to how to make a complaint to the school, which is quite England centric. But normally, if Scottish parents contact us, we'd say, well, we can help as much as we can. We'd also direct them to For Women Scotland. Welsh parents, we'd direct to Mech Cymru. There are other groups, so it is quite England centric. But the main thing is, you open that conversation with the school, you talk to other parents, you talk to your children, that they're your children, you talk to them, you tell them what your beliefs are, and that people may tell them different beliefs in school, and that's absolutely fine. That's part of growing up, that you realise not everybody thinks the exact same way your parents do. People might have different religions, they might vote for different political parties to your parents. So you are going to be exposed to that naturally growing up. But children need to sort of be empowered with the ability to sort of think things through to themselves and come to the conclusion of what do they think for themselves, what is fact, what's belief, what's propaganda. And normally this is all sort of stuff that this was stuff I was taught at school, sort of in my history lessons, sort of how to spot bias in an article, propaganda, this sort of thing. I never thought that I'd be sort of reflecting back to my sort of year 10 history lessons about propaganda used during the war and thinking, oh my goodness, that's what they're doing with this school resource. But it is, you just keep talking. And again, that's why people want to shut women up, because women talk. That's how information is
Mhm.
spread. You chat to the woman next to you in the supermarket queue, you're talking the hairdressers, you're down the beauticians, you're talking in the street as you take your children to school. Just keep talking. You raise awareness, and every little action, it's a ripple effect. Once you've started the conversation with those teachers at your children's school, they will start a conversation with another teacher, and it will trickle out. So yeah, read the information and just keep talking.
I think this critic coined the phrase really well, that women won't waste, and I love the fact that that phrase was coined. And it's something that, as you say, I'm going to be kind of take it back to me. I mind when I used to take the kids to school and I would go there, and you would see the women all standing nattering away to one another, and it would be, "Hi, how you doing? Ah, good." And I don't get how they can do like just like all every day, just like, not for me. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, you know. Like, I've got Wednesday drop off here and got my work to get to, and it was every day. And like you say, I'm thankful for it. I didn't understand it now. Now I fully understand what's going on. Now I know that, and sometimes it might be tattle about silly wee things, but in the most part, it's looking after kids and making sure that everybody's okay. So when you see women standing outside schools and they're having a wee chat, they may be talking about what was on the TV the night before, but they also may be talking about how to safeguard the kids that you're running in to drop off because you've got your work at 9 o'clock as well, you know. So it's been an enlightening moment for me getting in. It's been really dark getting into this, but it's been enlightening for the point of view it's shown some lights elsewhere that I didn't actually see before, and it was like, oh, they're helpful. Those are the helpful things. Those are the things that a lot of people like myself might have taken for granted. Like people standing chatting, but in the most part, they're chatting about what's going on in the school and how to keep the kids in the school safe. So where before I was rushing in and out and didn't understand it, now I'm like, oh, I wish I could have stopped and says thanks very much for doing what you do.
I think what you said there, though, Peter, about it's quite dark getting into this is a really good point, actually. But I wouldn't change getting into this now for anything, even as difficult as it has been, and as hard as it is to know what's actually happening out there, and it's an uphill battle constantly. I'd rather be here fighting it than not knowing about it. And I know they say ignorance is bliss, but I still would rather actually be here battling it than not being aware of it. And that's why I keep kind of trying to talk to everybody and anybody that will listen to me, as I'm just talking to them about it, trying to raise the awareness as much as possible, particularly with other parents, because I think this is where this ideology it's a breeding ground in schools, and then children are growing up, they're going to universities, and we know what's happening in universities. Obviously in Scotland just recently they're looking at introducing the sex work toolkit.
Yeah.
I've not got a load of information on that because I've been focusing on this, but that was just over the last couple of days it's been announced that they're looking into it.
I'll try and get some images and some stills of what there is available and put it through as I'm doing the edit here. I was wanting, I think that sometimes the language and the fact that people are trying to keep PC about everything. We want to do this, we want to do that. And there was an example today, and again, it was on Twitter, but I mean, this is called Tweet Street, so that it formed from being on Twitter and thinking, oh, well, I could use like a news program. It's like the idea, you know. And there was somebody had posted to say that, and I'm going to kind of alter names and just give you like an idea of what the story was, so that it doesn't draw ire to anybody or anything else. Their grandchild was going to a sleepover party with Jim, and the grandmother says, are there other boys going to be there? And their grandchild says, no, Jim used to be Eva, and we're just going to do a sleepover. It's all girls. Now, my comment was that no offence to the child in question, however, my alarm bells rings so much at the moment that I wouldn't be placing my child in that situation. And the response that I got was, yeah, it's not the child's fault. However, we'll send them, and I will blow a gasket type thing if I find out there's been any misgendering. And I'm thinking, right, okay, so you're worried about misgendering, right? You're not worried about sending your child, your grandchild, to somebody's house that believes that their daughter is a boy from the age of 4 who's now 7.
Yeah, I've seen this tweet as
Oh,
well. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Right. You're not worried about that. Like, what? For me, it's abuse. For me, those parents are abusing their child by enforcing a transition at the age of 4, between the age of 4 and 7, mentally abusing the fact that, oh, you can be this or you can be that. I don't understand it. So for me, it's no. I'm not putting my child in that risk where somebody could potentially encourage them to think differently, or encourage my child to end up questioning their own identity when they're secure. Sometimes I feel that people try to be too nice round about this situation rather than being more alert round about the situation. Is that something that you find, Tanya, or you've?
I think that's really shocking at that young age. I mean, why are they transitioning a child that young? I mean, what did this poor child do? Did she play with the wrong toys? Did she want to wear the wrong clothes? I mean, my girls are all quite old now, but a couple of them, when they were little, they always sort of wore the boys' school uniform to school. They always chose the boys' shoes when we went shoe shopping, because they said the girls' shoes didn't stand up to playing football. So they always picked the boys' shoes, and some of them had friends who were boys, and they've said to me, this is why you're so angry about this, isn't it? Because sort of 10 years later, somebody could have transitioned us, because I just sort of, oh yeah, that's what they're interested in. You let your kids pursue their own interests. You let them choose their clothes up to the point that is reasonable. They wanted to play football, dinosaurs, cars, whatever. You just let them get on with it. I mean, that's not my bag. I really liked pink and dolls when I was a kid, but just because I liked pink and dolls when I was a kid, that was just my interest. It never occurred to me when my daughters didn't like pink and dolls to say, oh, well, maybe you're a boy. And I can't understand how 10, 15 years later, that's become the progressive position. Because yes, I agree with Peter. It's abusive. Clothes and toys with little children. When I worked in early years, all the toys were for all children. Like we used to quite often have a little boy in a Cinderella dress who used to like the My Little Ponies, and there'd be a little girl running around outside in the Spider-Man outfit. And no one thought anything of it. It wasn't weird. We didn't think those children were the opposite sex. We just let children pursue their own interests. And I don't understand why in such a short space of time we've completely undone all our understanding of like normal childhood development, and that people now think this is the correct position. Oh yeah, now he's 7, he's a boy, but at 4 he was a girl.
Do you think
really,
the internet has played a part in,
oh,
in
absolutely,
what we're seeing?
Yeah, because yeah, we've now got parents who are, there are now people who have been grown up online, who will have had parents who weren't digital natives, so didn't know what they were looking at online, didn't make any attempt to stop it. So we've got people who were grown up, who were brought up by the internet, telling them things like, oh, well, if a little girl plays with cars, wants short hair, wants to wear trousers, means she's trans, means she's a boy. People who have been indoctrinated with this stuff all their life online, they're now parents themselves and doing what they think is best for their children, and it really isn't, and it's so sad.
You've got the other side as well, with all the lockdowns and restrictions that have been in place. You've got lonely children that might have been socially excluded, but they're feeling even more so, and they're finding online what I like to call them online glitter families that basically tell them to leave their own family, or not in so many words, but it's like, if your family aren't supportive, which means if your family question what you're actually expressing here, that could potentially be extremely harmful for you. If they are not supportive, come to us and we'll support you. And we know that grooming is just absolutely skyrocketed, and particularly in Scotland, it's absolutely skyrocketed over the last year. And that's because children are just given unfiltered, unfettered access to the internet, and finding these communities that welcome them in, and it just creates that further barrier and that further divide within the family structure, I think, as well, because the parents don't always know what's going on, and they're not always asking the right questions or enough questions about it.
Yeah, for me, this is the digital version that you want to come and see some puppies.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's how, like, if you take it to the, well, we were warned as kids that weren't digitalized and everything else, that like certain things, these are alarm bells. If somebody comes in, no, you come here, right? Or you go there, or you do this, or you, and you were guided by your parents. But as you say, for parents who are not online, the generational gap of safeguarding that they're missing because they're not seeing exactly. I'll say the electronic babysitter, when you go into cafes and you go in and you see it, or when you used to go into cafes, or when you used to go into restaurants before pandemic, and you used to see, and kids were sat there with, like, a full family just like sat at a table, and all the kids are on devices, and there's no chat time, there's no how was your day, how was this, how was that. For me, that was the thing that I noticed, like, were some of the things,
Emotional connections
that I
slightly missing.
I couldn't engage with that, because I'm like, I don't understand that. It's like, for me, again, and it may be the way that you're brought up with things. You sit, you go, you have your dinner, and you sit at the dinner table and you chat about the day's events, or like, what's the plans, and it's that's missing now. There is no connection, and it is easier that way for somebody to say, oh, there's no connection there. Want to come and see these puppies, and you know, and there's furries and all these things that are going on to entice young kids to go, oh, that's fun. They're colourful, they're flamboyant, and for these people, as adults, consenting adults, go ahead, do what you want.
Yeah.
But when it's safeguarding, when it's impinging on children's rights and the potential for the danger, parents should be more aware that, why is this happening? And it's, for me, it's been supported by governments, and think tanks that are supported by a lot of dark money in a lot of places that aren't verifiable on websites, you know, and those are flags for anybody else to go, wait a minute, why is this not checkable? Why can we not do this? Why can we not find that information out? Why is it been hidden? And it's been hidden so that they can achieve ultimately the control that they want to get. And what do we do? What do we do, Tanya?
I think you just keep talking. You talk to your children, you talk to your children's schools, you talk to other parents. All you can do is talk and raise awareness and take action where you need to. But it is a long, hard slog. I mean, a lot of our government departments in England, so a lot of regulatory capture has gone on here, like we've seen with girl guiding recently. Seems to have completely flushed all their safeguarding away. And I assume it's the same in Scotland, that all the organisations you would expect to protect children, like TIE and the anti-bullying stuff, that has now been infiltrated, and it's all now concentrating on gender, which is undermining safeguarding. So the only defence we do have against this is to keep going, to keep chipping away, talk to your own children, talk to your friends, talk to your family, keep challenging your school, write to your elected representatives. Even if they don't reply, keep writing to them. This is their job. Their job is to represent you and your concerns. So keep writing to them. Write your councillors, your MPs, your MSPs. Just keep writing letters, having conversations. Make it quite clear that you are not going away. You are not going to back down. You want your questions answered. This is a democracy. We live in a democracy. Assert your rights any way you can. If you can't put your name to a letter to your MP, get on Mumsnet. There's some really knowledgeable posters on Mumsnet. They're some of the people I've been most excited to meet during all this, when I've sort of been out at a meeting and someone sort of sidled up to me and said, "Oh, I'm this poster on Mumsnet. I don't know if you've ever heard of me." And I'm like, "Oh my God, your posts are so good." I read loads and loads of them, and they were clearly written by somebody who did work in safeguarding because they were so good. But that person can't be open, but they have put the information online so that somebody who can speak publicly, like myself, can do that. And there's other posters on Mumsnet again who clearly work in safeguarding, and I haven't ever met, but I would absolutely love to. So yeah, just in whatever way you can, keep talking, keep going, get that information out there. It's a long slog, but basically most people are good. Most people want to protect children, and it's a complete fallacy that everybody does believe in this stuff, that some women have penises. It's emperor's new clothes. The average person on the street knows that women don't have penises, and that if somebody goes into a changing room with women and children and gets their penis out, that's not a poor transgender woman we need to be kind to. That's a flasher who's committed a criminal offence and should be arrested.
Spot on, absolutely spot on. I couldn't have said it any better. Now, I'm aware of the time, Tanya, and I don't want to take too much of your Friday night up. What I would like to ask you, what can we expect to see from Safe Schools Alliance in the short to mid-term?
At the moment, we're working on information to help parents get access to PSHE and RSE materials in schools. A lot of schools are really good and will share them with parents. Some schools are refusing to share them with parents, which is always a red flag. And they've started coming up with things like, oh, copyright, or we've signed a non-disclosure, or refusing to answer FOIs. So we've done quite a lot of research into FOIs. Again, those anonymous women in the back room whose names people don't know, they're really good. We've done some research into that, and we will be putting out some more information soon about doing FOIs and getting hold of those materials from your children's school, because schools who care about children and care about the relationship with their parent community, they'll be quite happy to share those resources. And if a school doesn't want to share those resources with the parents, that's a massive red flag. Why would you not want your parent community backing up the messages you're giving children at home? We want everybody working together, singing from the same hymn book and educating the children in the same way. If the school doesn't want to show you what they're teaching your children, you need to be really suspicious. You need to be submitting an FOI, and you need to be making them show you what they're telling your children, because if they don't want to tell you that, you really have to question why that is.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so on that note, that leads us on nicely. We are doing a parents forum, Not With My Child. We've got a load of guest speakers coming, and we'll have a live audience, and we're going to be sharing the information, or we're going to be sharing, the guests are going to be sharing their experiences first of all. We're then going to be sharing some information as we go through. We're doing 3 of them between now and March, finishing up on Mother's Day, hopefully. We are special on Mother's Day, because the Scottish Government and Stonewall are trying to erase the word mother. And for me, that's an attack to get access to kids, given all that's gone before with these child sex surveys, and what Tanya's already mentioned. It's something that we should all be talking about. I've noticed the conversations are getting louder. So thanks. Keep on talking. We've also got Dr. M, who's M Pankhurst coming up. This will be our first where we have to actually protect somebody's identity, but we're doing the full podcast with Dr. M's just avatar on while she's speaking. And we've also got, this is coming back to the Scottish independence things, and also Scotland's local elections. We've got Robert Slavin coming up, talking about his bid to become councillor in the local elections. So that will all be coming up in the next week. Now, Tanya, just one final question. What's your thoughts on Scottish independence?
It's not an area I know anything about. Honestly, I always get accused of being right wing and Christian because I speak out about this sort of stuff. I'm atheist. I do vote, but I'm very much a floating voter. It's just not something I'm very well informed of. And anyway, I'm English. It's not really something for me to have an opinion on, is it? So
of course it is. England is part of this union with Scotland and Wales.
I think it's something for Scottish people to decide is what
Good answer.
Sorry for putting you in the spot. That's
absolutely fine. But I have had it said to me that I'm a good person to wheel out for if someone branches off beyond safeguarding, because I don't actually know a huge amount beyond safeguarding. I'm not very political. My other sort of top topics would be shoes and shopping, but once we get beyond.
I can't really talk about any of the two of those. Lucy, I've got a pair of shoes and I've been to a shop. Yep, brilliant. Right, no.
That's a bit as far as I go with that as well.
Seriously, I would like to thank you sincerely for the bottom of our hearts for coming on, spending the time to explain things to us. I will be sharing some of the links that you've sent me through the edit, and I'll get this back to you as quickly as I possibly can. So just ask you to say good night to everybody.
No, thank you very much, Peter. It's been great having me. It's been great to be here. I really appreciate being invited on. Thank you very much to Lucy. It's always good to speak to other people who've got that sort of in-depth knowledge of safeguarding as well. So thank you very much to both of you, and I look forward to seeing the edit. And thank you to any. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Tanya. And Lucy, you want to say good night?
Yep, thanks very much, Tanya. Honestly, it's been absolutely brilliant, and I would love if we could have you back on again in a wee while, just follow up on things as they move along at quite a pace, as they always seem to be doing just now. But thanks very much, it's been great.
Absolutely. So for Tweet Street Scotland Occupy, for Cinnamon Bridges, for Tanya at Safe Schools Alliance, and for Lucy for Parents Across Scotland, it's good night from us all, and keep on talking. Okay.
Thank you. For having me here, and thank you to everyone who's come along to listen. Yes, I'm one of the spokeswomen for Safe Schools Alliance. We are a grassroots group of parents, teachers, governors and other health and educational professionals with an interest in safeguarding children. Our aim is to ensure that safeguarding is upheld in schools and that the Equality Act is correctly interpreted, being mindful of the rights of all 9 protected characteristics to ensure that schools are properly inclusive environments which are welcoming and tolerant of all members of their parent and student community. We supported child claimants in claims against Oxfordshire County Council and the CPS. Oxfordshire County Council, which you mentioned, they released a trans inclusion toolkit which didn't take account of safeguarding. It didn't take account of all the protected characteristics. and it removed the very children it claimed it was helping from established safeguarding frameworks. We originally had 3 claimants. We had a teacher claimant, a student claimant, and a parent claimant. And then the judicial review was granted to the child claimant, who was concerned that this toolkit stripped her of her rights to single-sex sports, toilets, changing rooms, and overnight accommodation. We were granted the judicial review after a High Court judge found that the Oxfordshire Trans Inclusion Toolkit was arguably unlawful. Rather than defend the toolkit in court, Oxfordshire withdrew the toolkit and it won't be coming back. However, there are several similar toolkits throughout the country, all of which seem to be based on all sorts guidance, which was itself based on the original Cornwall guidance from 2012, all of which have been heavily influenced by Stonewall and seem to prioritise political ideology over safeguarding. The other case we supported was against the CPS, who had produced a hate crimes pack for schools that again had similar problems in that it breached the boundaries of girls and told them that they had no right to choose their own friends, single-sex sports, changing rooms, all other spaces you'd expect to be single-sex for reasons of privacy and dignity, and insinuated that if they objected to having males in their spaces, this may be a hate crime. We are very in favour of properly inclusive relationships and sex education in schools, but safeguarding must always come first. I'm an ex-chair of governors, I'm an early years practitioner. I've spent my entire adult life caring for children. I have 20 years experience working with children in voluntary and paid positions. And during that time, I've had a lot of safeguarding training, including safer recruitment training, as I've been involved in recruiting people to work in schools and with children. Safer recruitment came out of the Bishard inquiry and the Warner report, and is based on the premise that it's easier to prevent predators or unsuitable people from entering your organisation than it is to remove them once they are there. We believe that safeguarding and safer recruitment needs to be extended and strengthened, and that not just people who work directly with children, but people producing materials and policies and resources that affect children should also be subject to very stringent safeguarding and safer recruitment. We're very concerned with a lot of the RSE materials. We have seen that they don't consider the rights of all children, particularly the people who have written them don't seem to understand the effects some of these materials could have on children who have been abused. We know that in any class of 30 children, there will be at least one child who has suffered sexual abuse, probably many more. Statistics show us how prevalent child sexual abuse is, and that many children who are abused won't disclose this until adulthood, if at all. Many won't even realise that they have been abused. During their sex education lesson, that may be the point that they realise that what is happening to them is actually abuse and is wrong. So it is really important that children, and especially children who have been abused and that nobody knows about this, are prioritised in the delivery of all these lessons. Many materials we have seen don't do this. We again were involved in campaigning against the Respect Yourself RSE in Warwickshire. That claimed to be inclusive RSE, but there was some horrifying stuff in there, like it told children that bukkake, which is an extreme porn act, could be liberating. It suggested anal sex as a way of avoiding pregnancy. Whilst describing term felching to children, it described all sex as icky. It was really there were a lot of problems with this. This has now been withdrawn, but Johnny Hunt, who was behind it, is still involved with RSE, and recently wrote for TES an article on teaching sexual citizenship and pleasure to school children, which again didn't seem to acknowledge the effect this could have on children who have been subject to abuse. Sorry, I'm running out of time now, but quickly, another one we campaigned against to have changed was the pack from ASDA, which lots of distressed parents contacted us about because it contains slogans such as "love is love" and "love has no age." Parents contacted us who had been abused as children, who said that these were phrases that their abusers had used to them, and they were really distressed to see these phrases in RSE material. So yes, I think that's the end of my time. I could talk forever on this. Safeguarding is a real passion of mine, but when this video goes out, we will include links and screenshots of all the scenarios I have referred to, and people are welcome to get in touch if they want further information on anything. So thank you very much for having me here.
He used to give me roses. I wish he could again, but that was on the outside, and things were different then. We built our world together with a love so clear and strong, but that was on the outside. Where did I go wrong? On the inside, the sun still shines and the rain falls down, but the sun and rain are prisoners too. When morning comes around, last night I dreamed we were together, sharing all the love we'd known, till I had to face the nightmare of waking up alone. On the inside, the sun still shines and the rain falls down, but the sun and rain are prisoners too. When morning comes around, on the inside the roses grow. They don't mind the stony ground, but the roses here are prisoners too. When morning comes around, he used to give me roses. I wish he could again, but that was on the outside.
one of the people I follow on Twitter, Clem Fandango is the name, and it's, I'll put a link to it on this. They've launched a new blog spot, and it's a historical. Now, the threads that they've done on Twitter were fantastic, so I'm really looking forward to getting in about this. I've been busy today, but I've had a quick browse through it, and some of the stuff, for me, it's amazing. If you're interested in the history of Scotland, and not necessarily all the histories that you might have heard before, it's some really wee niche mentions of things. So for certain different places, so a really good place to go. I would recommend that you give this a wee follow and have a look at the things that are included within. If you like Scotland, if you like anything about Scotland, then this will be sure to give you something to read. I'm really looking forward to getting in about it more, to be honest, but it was launched today, so I said I would get a wee plug. So have a wee look at it.